The second type of loop we want to look at is called an event-controlled loop, or sometimes also called a sentinel-controlled loop. In this loop, we're looking for a specific value or event to happen, such as entering a certain number or a certain word. We're going to work with numbers in both of the examples in this lesson, so we're going to be looking for a particular number entered to stop our loop. So we'll start out with the program to average a series of test scores. So to do that, we need a variable for the average, which will initialize to 0.0. We need two integer variables, a total variable and a grade variable. We'll go ahead and initialize total to 0 also. Grade will be entered by the user. So the first thing we're going to do is prompt the user to enter a grade. Oh, I left out one variable. I'll add it in just a second. We also need a count variable, so we'll know how many grades to average when we compute the average. So we prompt the user to enter a grade, then we store that grade by converting it to integer after we've read it from the console, just like we always do. Now here's where we write the event or the sentinel. We say while grade not equal to -1, because a grade can be 0 through 100, maybe more than 100 for extra credit, but we'll say 0 through 100, but can't be -1. We're certainly not cruel enough to give negative grades for tests. So while the value of grade is not equal to -1, add that grade to the total, increment the count by 1. Let's do a prefix increment. And while we're at it, let's also initialize count to 0, like so. There we go. And then after we've incremented count, then we need to prompt the user to enter a grade again, because we need to get the prompt and the input inside the loop. So we're going to Control-C, Control-V to copy in there. Notice that the second line always gets scooted over, so we'll move it back. And that should close out the loop. So the user is going to enter grades until they enter a -1, and then the loop will stop at that point. So once that happens, then we're going to compute the average by dividing the total by the count, and then we can write out the average to the user. And let's do one more thing. In our prompt, let's write -1 to quit, so the user will know exactly how to quit out of the program, or at least quit out of the input loop. There we go. So there's the program, and again, the event that we're looking for is a grade of -1. At that point, the loop will stop. Otherwise, we'll continue to enter grades and add them to the total. So let's run this program and see how it looks. Some even numbered grades. We'll do 100, and then 90, and then 80, and then 70, and then 60. And then we'll type in -1, and the average is 80. So the event of entering -1, or sometimes that's also called a sentinel value, -1 being the sentinel that we're looking for to make the loop stop. So let's look at one more example of an event-controlled loop with numbers. Let's comment out our code from before, and then we'll work right below it here. Let's have the user enter a series of numbers and then determine which one is the largest while the user is entering the list of numbers. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a variable called largest and set it to 0. Then we'll also create a variable number, and then we'll say console right, enter a number 0 to quit, and then number equals convert to int 32, console read line, like so. And then while number is not equal to 0, then we loop. Then we say if number is greater than largest, largest equals number. And of course, on the first entry, if it's greater than 0, and it will be since 0 is only to quit, then the number entered will be the largest number. Then all we have to do next is once again prompt the user. We'll just copy and paste that back in here at the bottom. Close out the loop and then write out the answer. There we go. We have a console read key in there already. So let's run the program. So we'll enter 5, then 2, then 10, then 7, and then 12, and then 0, and the largest number is 12. So of the numbers that we entered, 12 was the largest. So these are two examples of what are called event-controlled or sentinel-controlled loops, where the event would be the user enters the value that leads us to drop out of the loop, or the loop looks for the sentinel value, in this case 0, in the other case it was -1, that causes the loop to stop. So that wraps up our discussion of while loops for this chapter. We'll look at them again in the exercises. But now we're going to move to a second type of loop, and that's called the for loop, and we'll see that in the next lesson.